Welcome to the theater of electrochemistry. I'm Dr. Chem, and in today's explainer, we're going to explore the dynamic stage where electrons are the actors and electrodes are the set. Whether you're scaling up a totally new battery technology or, probing the fundamental limits of a catalyst, understanding the physical stage where these reactions happen is absolutely paramount.
So let's start with a really provocative question to anchor this masterclass. How exactly do we measure the invisible driving desire of an electron to move? Think about it. An electron doesn't just jump from one atom to another without a reason. It needs a driving force, a sort of chemical tension. And to harness that, to actually measure it and control it, we need a highly specialized set of tools.
All right, here's our syllabus for today's explainer. First, we'll trace the spark of electrochemistry. Second, the three-electrode setup. Third, the working indicator electrode. Fourth, the reliable reference electrode. Fifth, pseudo and non-aqueous references. And we will wrap up with Dr. Chem's golden rules.
Let's jump right into part 1, the spark of electrochemistry. To truly set the stage, we first have to understand the fundamental difference in how we listen to and direct our electrons. Before we get into the complex modern lab bench, we got to look at the foundations of electrochemical cells. The classic galvanic cell brilliantly illustrates this whole concept. Here, a spontaneous electron flow actually does work by separating reduction at the cathode from oxidation at the anode. You've got your zinc side giving up electrons, your copper side accepting them, and an external circuit allowing that current to flow, all while a salt bridge maintains the balance of charge. This is a battery in its most elemental form.
But here's the thing. How we interrogate this system changes absolutely everything. In potentiometry, we're measuring the desire for charge to flow as voltage without actually letting it run. It's literally like measuring the pressure of water behind a closed dam. There are no reactions actively taking place. Conversely, in amperometry or voltammetry, we open the floodgates. We apply an external voltage to the cell and measure the actual flow of electrons as electrical current.
Moving right along to part 2, the three-electrode setup. Taking all of this from the theoretical textbook to the modern lab bench requires a highly specialized blueprint. That two-beaker setup we just talked about, great for a textbook, but for high-precision analytical work, we need something vastly superior. Enter the three-electrode setup. We use 3 distinct players here for a very good reason. We need one specific site for our reaction of interest, a steadfast anchor to measure against, and a third component to handle the electrical heavy lifting. Trying to measure highly precise potentials while simultaneously passing a massive current through the exact same measuring stick? Yeah, that simply doesn't work.
So the crucial takeaway here is that the counter electrode acts as our silent partner. It completes a circuit and takes the entirety of the current flow. Because the counter electrode takes the hit, it ensures that absolutely no significant current passes through our delicate reference electrode. If current were to pass through the reference, it would become polarized. The internal chemical equilibrium would shift, and suddenly your baseline potential has drifted right out of calibration.
Now for part 3, the working indicator electrode.
Let's shine the spotlight on the undisputed star of our show. This is the exact location where your electrochemical reaction of interest actually takes place. Looking at this material showdown, choosing the right material dictates your safe zone or potential window. You've got glassy carbon as the robust, highly inert workhorse with a wide potential window, making it the standard choice for most experiments. Then there's platinum, offering blistering fast electron kinetics and incredible conductivity. But it can be surprisingly unsuited for reactions like hydrogen evolution, where its own catalytic activity dominates the data. And finally, gold, which gives you highly specific selectivity and is the undisputed king for CO2 reduction studies. And hey, it's not just about the material, it's also about the geometry. While most standard experiments use stationary electrodes, where reactants just passively drift to the surface, introducing a rotating disk electrode changes the game entirely. By spinning the electrode, you create a controlled vortex, a laminar flow. This maintains a perfectly constant diffusion layer thickness, bringing fresh reactants to the surface at a steady, mathematically precise rate. It is absolutely essential for studying fast catalytic reactions. Which brings us to part 4, the reliable reference electrode. Every great performance needs a steady anchor, and in our electrochemical cell, that is the reference electrode. If the working electrode is our lead actor, the reference electrode is the stage floor. It must never, ever move. The tricky thing about electrochemistry is that we can't measure an absolute potential in isolation. We can only measure a difference between 2 points.
So, by global convention, we define our absolute zero against the standard hydrogen electrode, or SHE. It consists of a platinized platinum electrode bathed in hydrogen gas at 1 atmosphere, and an acid solution with a proton activity of 1. But let's be real, bubbling highly flammable hydrogen gas through concentrated acid is incredibly impractical and frankly a bit dangerous for daily lab use.
Because the SSG is so impractical, we've built a whole map of the electrochemical universe using secondary standards. Notice the practical alternatives mapped against that absolute zero. There's the ubiquitous silver/silver chloride electrode sitting incredibly stably at roughly 0.197 volts. Just below that, the saturated Kalama electrode at 0.242 volts. Every single measurement you take with these practical electrodes can be mathematically translated right back to the SHE scale.
Looking closely at one of these historical heavyweights, the saturated Kalama electrode uses liquid mercury and a paste of mercury chloride. Now, while the liquid mercury provides an incredibly fast response and is super easy to clean, modern labs largely prefer silver/silver chloride. The reason is pretty straightforward. We really want to avoid mercury's notorious toxicity and the massive environmental headaches of disposing of it.
Let's shift gears to part 5, pseudo and non-aqueous references.
So, what happens to our pristine setup when we abandon water and go off-road into organic solvents like acetonitrile or dichloromethane? Well, aqueous reference electrodes are full of water and salts. In non-aqueous environments, they can leak water and chloride ions, completely cross-contaminating our delicate organic cell. To solve this, we rely on quasi-reference electrodes combined with an internal standard like ferrocene. Ferrocene undergoes a highly predictable, reversible oxidation that IUPAC specifically recommends as a standard redox couple for calibrating non-aqueous systems. It's a real lifesaver.
And the beauty of working in organic solvents is that if you ever need a fresh baseline, you can easily build a DIY quasi-reference electrode in just a few minutes. You simply take a clean silver wire, dip it into concentrated hydrochloric acid to chemically grow a thin, insoluble layer of silver chloride, let it dry, and then house it in a glass frit tube filled with your organic electrolyte. It's inexpensive, fresh, and perfectly matched to your solvent system.
And finally, part 6, Dr. Chem's Golden Rules.
Before we lower the curtain on this explainer, I need to impart some rapid-fire laboratory wisdom. These are the pitfalls that catch even seasoned researchers completely off guard. Never forget these golden rules. First, never assume inert means invincible. Even platinum can form surface oxides or hydrides over long experiments that drastically alter its behavior. Second, if you're testing a non-noble hydrogen evolution catalyst, absolutely do not use a platinum counterelectrode. Trace platinum will actually dissolve in the electrolyte, deposit onto your working electrode, and falsely make your mediocre catalyst look like a world record performer. Furthermore, always maintain the exact internal chloride concentration of your reference electrodes, and be incredibly careful with glass frits. They're porous, they trap ions, and moving them without soaking them will absolutely cross-contaminate your electrolytes.
Oh, and beware of a hidden phantom in your data. Whenever two different electrolytes meet, say across a glass frit or salt bridge, ions diffuse at different rates based on their size and charge. This differing diffusion creates local regions of unbalanced charge right at the boundary layer, known as a liquid junction potential. It acts as an invisible phantom voltage that will secretly skew your data if you aren't actively trying to minimize it by matching your electrolytes. I'll leave you with this final thought to ponder for your next experiment. If you can't see the actors, how well do you truly know the play? Your electrodes aren't just pieces of metal and glass. They are living, dynamic surfaces that dictate absolutely everything about your data. Treat them with respect, keep them clean, know their limits, and they will reveal the deepest secrets of the atomic world. Thank you for joining me in this masterclass, and happy experimenting.